Thank you, Paul. I guess since this is pretty informal, I don't know, is it better to wait till the end for questions, or just, what do you guys usually do?
However you want to take it.
Okay, well, how about if you have questions, just, I guess, raise your hand, and I will call on you, and let's do it that way, because I'm fine with that. Feel free. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you today about bats, but I'm also talking to you about this new kind of program we have called Gardening for Bats. And I will talk more about it in a second, but first I just want to kind of talk a little bit about where I work, Bat Conservation International, what we do, and then just sort of some Bats 101. Do we have anyone in here who doesn't like bats? No? Doesn't like bats? Or is kind of indifferent towards bats? And that's okay, no judgment. Okay, oh, I see somebody. Okay, that's okay. Appreciate your honesty. Look, this is so cute. It looks like a hamster. This is a red bat. For those that I asked earlier, this is an eastern red bat. We do have them around here, so it's not a hamster. Anyway. So I work for Bat Conservation International. We are a nonprofit. We were founded in 1982 and actually founded here in Austin originally. So at that time, the city had just rebuilt the Congress Avenue Bridge and accidentally made it a perfect bat habitat. This was not intended. So all these bats moved in, the Mexican free-tailed bats, and everyone was freaking out. There's all these stories, if you go back and kind of Google it, you can see stories of people saying they were getting attacked by bats down by the lake, that like bats were taking over the city. And they actually thought about potentially tearing the bridge down and redoing it. So there was a lot of it was sort of the nexus of bat-human conflict back in the day. And so the people who started BCI decided they would go to Austin and start the organization there. They originally were in Wisconsin and they moved down here to officially found Bat Conservation International. Now they got the Texas Monthly has an award called the Bum Steer Award, which they give to organizations or people that do particularly stupid things. They gave us that award when we started. They were like, why would you move to like the nexus of like bat-human conflict where everyone is really anti-bat? But I think they saw that as an opportunity. And so thinking about Austin now, like we are a bat city, right? It's like so much a part of our identity, and they bring in, I've heard an estimate, the bats at the bridge bring in like $11 to $12 million a year in tourism money. So how many of you have seen the bats downtown? Awesome, okay, great, well, cool. So we started in Austin, very humble beginnings, but now we are much larger. We actually only have a couple staff in Austin now, and we're sort of all over the country. And we kind of work all over the world. So our mission has kind of expanded. We originally started just trying to change hearts and minds about bats and explain to people why they were important, why they mattered. Now we're really just working in science and conservation and engagement to end bat extinctions worldwide. And that's really what we try to do every single day. So we have kind of a conservation team, a science team, and then a people team, an engagement team. That's where I work. And this is a Mexican free-tailed bat. So these are the bats that live under the bridge, in case you were wondering. Super cute, right? Thank you. This one is cute. So some bat basics. So there are some common bat myths you will hear. Various ones, and some of these are sort of old school, some of these are still going around. I kind of like to just go through them really fast because I don't want to talk about them for too long because I don't want to perpetuate the myth, but people still say these things all the time. So this idea that bats are blind, how many of you have heard this one? Yeah, my grandma used to say this constantly. She's like, blind as a bat. So bats can actually see about as well as we can. They have fairly good eyesight, and some of the fruit bats are larger, they have really big eyes, and they actually don't really use echolocation to get around. I'll talk more about that in a second. But they can actually see fairly well. It's just bats hunt at night. So if you can imagine us trying to get around at night with no light, how would that go? Not well. So they actually use sound to get around at night, and it's kind of like a superpower, but they are not blind. That is not true. Another one is they want to get in your hair. How many of you have heard this one? Yeah, it's sort of like I feel like this one's sort of falling away, which is good, but people swear to me, they're like, a bat attacked me, got in my hair, and I'm like, I don't know if that's what happened, but they don't want to be in your hair, I promise. You know, they roost in bat boxes, they roost in caves, they roost under the bridge, you know, they roost in trees, but they do not roost in human hair. So they have no interest in us. They can actually echolocate something as small as one human hair. So they're that good at it, and they're that good at sensing something that small. So if they, it's just not a thing. And I think it's just something that sort of started out of fear. There's a lot of fear-based sort of things about bats out there. Another one is they are rodents with wings or rats with wings, which is adorable, right? No. So with this, they're actually not that closely related to rodents. They're both mammals. Bats are mammals, rodents are mammals, we are mammals. But bats are actually in a different order called Chiroptera, which literally means hand wing. I'll talk more about that in a second. Rodents are in the order Rodentia. Different order, bats are actually more closely related to horses and humans than they are to rodents on the phylogenetic tree, which sounds really wild, but they did some DNA analysis and came to that conclusion. So they're actually not that closely related to rodents. Also, rodents give birth a lot, right? If you have rats or mice in your yard or shed, you're gonna have a lot of them. Bats give birth to mainly one pup per year. So they reproduce really, really slowly. It's a huge difference between bats and rodents. Another one is that all bats are vampire bats. That's sort of what the bat attack is right here. So I have a question for you. There's over 1,400 species of bats in the world. How many of those do you think actually specialize on feeding on blood? Just a guess. One? Have you heard me talk before? It's supposed to be a dramatic reveal.
I was gonna say $13.99.
$13.99. Okay, we've got one and we've got $13.99. Somewhere in the middle. Actually, okay, so it's three, but of those three, only one specializes on the blood of mammals. So gold star for you. Yes, so there's actually only one kind of truly what we consider a vampire bat that actually feeds on the blood of mammals. They are found in Latin America and South America. We do not have them here. And it's just one out of over 1,400 bats. So it's a very, very small percentage of bats that actually are vampire bats. It's just they're always portrayed in the media that way, yeah.
And that's the species like they bite and then they come back and lick it?
Yeah, they do. I think it's adorable. Like, so basically, vampire bats are really cool. And if you want to get into a nerdy bat rabbit hole, feel free to just Google vampire bats. There's like videos of them on a treadmill, which is fascinating because they don't echolocate really. They get on the ground, and if they sense like a larger mammal, like a cow, a deer or something, they actually walk on the ground when the thing is sleeping, and they'll climb up it, and then their nose is really kind of, you can see their nose is kind of like, sort of like a pig nose, kind of stuck up, and they can actually sense where the blood is close to the skin. So they make a little incision, and the blood starts to pool, and then they lap it up like a little kitten, and it's just so sweet. So yeah, they only drink about a teaspoon of blood per night, so it's really not that much. So they're not like diving down and sucking on something's neck. They don't suck blood. They actually get around in a really interesting way, and they're actually pretty fast on that treadmill, which is just wild to see a bat walking on the ground. Yeah. A teaspoon. Nothing. And they lap it. They don't suck it, they lap it up, just like a little cat. Okay. I can talk about vampire bats all day, but I won't. So the last one is that, bats are often associated with rabies, and I think this is something that is often perpetuated by health departments. And I will say rabies is scary. Absolutely. It can be 100% fatal if you don't treat it in time. The issue is, about 1% of wild bats actually have rabies. But it's sort of a sampling bias because when people interact with bats, if they see a bat during the day, if it's on the ground, that is potentially a sick bat. Whereas, there's millions and millions of bats we don't interact with at night. So it's just when people sometimes come across bats in strange settings, that's potentially a sick bat. So I think people tend to think of bats more as having rabies, when actually any mammal can have rabies. It's just one of those things where if you do find a mammal or wildlife kind of out of context or acting strangely, you just want to use common sense, always. So yeah, that is my rabies spiel. But anyway, so bats are just like us. So I said they're from the order Chiroptera, which is Latin for hand wing. You can see actually the bones in our arms, and also in a cat and a whale, are just like the bones in a bat's wings. So actually they fly, their fingers are elongated, and the skin between their fingers makes up their wings. So they kind of fly. Come on, everyone, do it with me. Jazz hands! Yes! Beautiful. Flying with jazz hands. So you can kind of see, and that's their little thumb up there at the top. And that's what they look like. So yeah, Chiroptera, hand wing. Fun fact, impress your friends with that knowledge. So we just had a State of the Bats report come out in 2023. And it looked at kind of all the bats in the United States, or North America, I should say, trying to figure out kind of what was their status. And for some of them, you know, there's not a lot of information. Some we have a lot of information. But they came up with the estimate that over 50% of our bats are at risk of a population decline or headed to extinction in the next 15 years, which is dramatic. And this just came out, so we're still kind of reeling from this. But it's just to show you that a lot of our bats need help right now, and they need bat advocates, which I hope you all will be by the end of tonight, even my friend back there. But there's kind of a couple issues for this. How many of you know what white nose syndrome is? Paul, do you want to tell the class?
Well, it's my understanding it is a fungus that actually grows where you would think it would be up in the nostril nasal cavity of bats as they are in sort of a hibernation mode, and eventually basically kills them because of suffocation.
Yeah, so it's pretty. So in 2006, we believe white nose syndrome is a fungus that exists in Europe and other places. Someone had it, we think, on their caving gear. In 2006, they entered a cave in New York, brought that fungus, unaware of they were doing that, and that's how it came to the United States. So since 2006, we have lost millions and millions of bats from this. It really likes caves. It likes kind of that cold but humid situation that caves are in. And so it's an issue for bats that are hibernating, and that's kind of one of the main things that's happened to the bat populations in the United States. So in Texas, we had our first confirmed white nose syndrome death in 2020. Right now in this state, it's just impacting a bat called the cave myotis, but it's kind of something that's just sort of marching across the country, which is really sad. And we're trying really hard to do a lot of different things, but it's one of those things where it's sort of hard to figure out how to stop it. And I'm happy to talk about that more. I know it's a big downer, and I'm sorry, but it's good to know. But there's other issues too. So wind energy is also one that's sort of complicated because a lot of, we love green energy. We're supportive of green energy. Green energy is great, but for some reason, certain bats are attracted to the wind turbines, and they're really curious, and they investigate the turbines and end up getting struck. So we're kind of working with wind energy companies. There's sort of a large coalition we're a part of to just try to mitigate some of that loss and try to prevent it if we can. Because wind energy is blowing up right now in a huge way, which is fantastic. It's just we want to make sure that the bats are not harmed in the process. And then just normal habitat loss, destruction, climate change, all these things are kind of working against our bats having a steady population in the future. So that's the sad stuff. Here's some more happy stuff. Question? Sure.
You said hunting?
Yeah, in the world. Yeah, so there is a huge kind of bushmeat trade of bats in certain countries and certain parts of the world where people actually will hunt bats, eat bats. In some places they're doing it in a sustainable way, in some places they're not. So it's kind of complicated. But yeah, it is a more common thing, like in Africa and Asia. Yeah. Anyone ever eaten a bat? No.
Eat a bat, you say?
No, have you eaten a bat? You have? Where at?
In Palau.
Palau.
In the Micronesia.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so it's
We just hold endangered species.
Oh boy, oh boy. Okay, so all of our bats in Central Texas eat insects. They are all insectivorous bats. So we love them for pest control. Bats are a super amazing natural pest control that we've got. They did an estimate, and they eat a lot of kind of agricultural pests, so things that attack our crops, like the cotton and corn bollworm, things like that. Once they become a moth, the bats will just gobble them up. So a study found that they save the ag industry in the United States about $20 billion with a B annually with that pest control service, which is just kind of mind-blowing to think about that. They also eat mosquitoes, which I know nobody likes. But they also eat a lot of our garden pests too. So bats are really amazing pest control, and they're really, really good at it. Okay, so I have a video, which is fun. Let's see, will it work? No. There we go, okay. So the bat's gonna come in. You're gonna see him echolocate. You can't hear him echolocate, but I'll play it again. Yeah, so this will just show you he's echolocating, he's coming in, senses the spider, adjusts his course, and then that spider has no chance. Oh, here we go. Who likes spiders? Okay, sorry. This one didn't make it. See, they use their tail as a scoop. And they actually eat on the wing, which means they just eat while they fly. I'll play it one more time. I think it's a little brown bat, actually. Right? That spider's like, oh no. Okay, so this next video, there's sound. So when bats echolocate, we can't hear it. It is too high of a frequency for our ears to pick up. But some technology, there's acoustic monitoring with bats. There's some technology that actually allows us to hear it. It translates it to a lower frequency. So for this video, the echolocation calls have been translated to a lower frequency, so you'll be able to hear it. And then they do this thing when they get closer and closer to something, and this is a moth right here. They do what's called a terminal buzz, which sort of sounds like a raspberry noise, kind of like a noise. I don't know how to do it any better than that. But it's basically they get closer and closer and closer, and then they eat the bugs. So if you're actually monitoring bats and you're hearing that terminal buzz, that means they're eating, which is a really cool way to figure that out. Okay, you guys ready to listen? So right when he gets close, he does that last kind of noise. He just does acrobatics. Pretty cool. There we go. All right, so bats are also important pollinators. Again, we do not have pollinating bats here. We do have some in West Texas. And there are some parts of the desert Southwest where we have pollinating bats in the US, but again, most of our bats in the United States eat bugs. But bats are super important pollinators. Does anyone here like tequila, agave? Okay, yeah. So they're actually one of the most important pollinators of agave. So next time you have a margarita, just, cheers the bats, because they're making that happen. This is an agave flower right here. And you can see kind of how the face is different. This is a pollinating bat. It's a less so long-nosed bat. They have really long tongues that actually help them pollinate and get nectar. And they're actually pollinators of, I think it's over 500 different types of ecologically and economically important plants, but including the wild type of some of our most favorite fruits. So these are kind of some of the things that bats pollinate in the wild. I have one more video. So this is a bat in a lab, obviously. Pretend this is a flower, and that's nectar at the bottom there. So you're going to see the bat come in, checking it out. Just slurps it up. Drinking the nectar. And you can see how far he got in there. Like, they're really efficient pollinators. They get coated with pollen, which is really great for plants.
That has to be a horn-nosed bat or something.
So they're actually called the leaf-nosed bats. They're the phyllostomid bat family. So they all kind of have those leaf things on their nose. It's really common for pollinating bats. I think it helps them kind of locate flowers through smell. But see how far, he's like covered with pollen if this is a flower. All right, so the last thing is bats are important for seed dispersal. So there are fruit-eating bats. Again, we don't have them here in the US. They're in kind of the more tropical parts of the world, but they eat a lot of fruit. And this is a flying fox. These are kind of the ones you might see, they look like sort of like wiener dogs with wings. They're very cute if you like that. But they have really, really great eyesight, because look at their eyes, they're quite large. But they eat a lot of fruit. And when they eat the fruit, they do not generally digest the seeds. So the seeds come out in the form of, who knows the fancy word for bat poop? Guano. Good job. So bats are actually really important for seed dispersal, because if this is an area of the rainforest that's been clear cut, so most animals will not cross this because they look, it's really exposed, feels dangerous. Fruit-eating bats will cross this all night long, without really thinking about it. They're dropping guano as they're flying. So that guano, it's got the seeds in it. The guano is a really good fertilizer just on its own. So actually it's like the perfect setting for these new seeds to grow. So about 95% of new growth in clear-cut areas is due to fruit bats, which is so important for rainforest regeneration. So they do a huge service that way. Okay, so the biggest bat in the world is the golden crowned flying fox. They have about a 5.5-foot wingspan. right? Very large. They're about 3 feet tall. And they are not here, sadly. They are in mostly kind of Asia, Philippines. And then the smallest bat in the world is the bumblebee bat, or Kitty's hognose bat. They're about 3 centimeters long. They weigh about 2 grams, and it's actually the world's smallest mammal. So they're super, super tiny. So just think about the immense diversity between these two extremes. Bats kind of fill all different niches in the world.
And where's this one?
This one is in Myanmar, in Thailand. Yeah. So we do not have this one either. Be a good little pocket pal. So I want to talk really quickly about our bats because, you know, we should be aware and supportive of our bats here in Austin. Texas is hilarious because it always has to be the best and the biggest. So we have about 33, I put it in quotes, bat species in this state. But one of those, somebody found a mummified vampire bat in Rio Grande Valley after a hurricane. It was dead, been dead forever, somehow flew up here, found one, now that's on the list. So we say we have 33 species of bats. Do we?
Do you have vampire bat?
Yeah, we had one vampire bat once. It got blown up here while it was dead. So 33 species in Texas, most of it is state in the United States, which, you know, makes sense. But we have about 8 here in Austin that are regulars here. So one of them is this little hamster guy. So this is the eastern red bat. So I know we always think of bats as like roosting in these big colonies, you know, like Congress Avenue Bridge, but these are solitary tree roosting bats. So you might have them in your yard right now and you'd never know it because basically they curl up into kind of like a little ball during the day and they look like a dead leaf, so they're really trying to conceal themselves, and they roost by themselves in trees, so they're pretty uncommon to come across. But they're very common here in Austin. If you talk to Austin Bat Refuge, does a lot of the bat rehabilitation around here, they get these guys a lot in like May and June. And the moms, these moms, I told you bats usually have 1 pup per year. These moms are like overachievers and sometimes will have up to 4, which for bats is just wild that they would have that many babies. And it's just the mom taking care of them in a tree by herself. She's doing a lot of work. Yeah.
They have a horse?
Yes. They have kind of 4 nipples and like each baby's like attached to a nipple basically, and like you'll come across like, you know, you'll see like a mom and then like 4 little babies kind of snuggled in there. It's crazy. Yeah. We also have yellow bats. This is the northern yellow bat. We may also have the southern yellow bat too. We're sort of figuring that out because they sound very similar. But these love palm trees. So if you have a palm tree, somehow made it through the winter apocalypse, I know most of the palms in Austin do not, but there are a few. And you leave like the fronds that are dead kind of down, the shaggy ones, leave them. That is perfect habitat for yellow bats. And these are, again, small colony roosters, so maybe like 3 or 4 or 5 within like those dead palm fronds, you'll have a little colony of yellow bats that are really cool. And fuzzy. Evening bats, these guys love dead trees, dead wood. So I know, you know, we always want to take down dead trees because they don't look that nice, I guess, but if you can leave them up and it's not a safety hazard, evening bats absolutely love dead trees, and you'll see them in dead trees in certain areas. And they have smaller colonies, like maybe between 20 and 30 bats sometimes, but they are absolutely in kind of this dead wood area. And these guys also have really giant poops for some reason. It's just what they're known for. Fun fact. And then the tricolored bat is our smallest bat. Has anyone been to Inner Space Caverns or Longhorn Caverns? Or yeah, so did you see bats while you were there, or any bats? So sometimes you'll see like 1 tricolored bat hanging out there, and they're super tiny. People call them the chicken nugget bat for some reason because they're just very, very small. But they actually are roosting in caves. These guys are actually, I think, about to be listed as endangered probably this fall, unfortunately. They've been really hit hard with white nose syndrome in other parts of the country, as well as wind energy issues too. So these are ones that are really common in our caves here, and very much like an Austin bat that we love, so just good to know what they look like. And then sometimes when they're in the caves, they'll get condensation on their little coats, and it looks like they have a sparkly jacket on, which is fun. And then this one, everyone knows these guys. This is the state flying mammal, the state flying mammal of Texas, which is silly, but that is what they are. Their genus Erin actually is like a wrinkle-lipped bat genus. You can see they have like very wrinkly little lips. These all give birth to one pup a year. Most of the large colonies are maternity colonies. So downtown under Congress Avenue Bridge is a maternity colony. Bracken Cave is a maternity colony too. These bats are like all these amazing superlatives. Like they clock them going 98 miles per hour, powered flight, which is the fastest mammal. If you don't count, like with people always say peregrine falcons are faster animals, but they have gravity on their side, so they're plunging. These guys are flying 98 miles per hour flying, which is impressive.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Where did the males go? Did they stay?
Good question. Some of them.
At the bar in Mexico.
Some of them stay in Mexico and just hang out and have fun, grow down. And then there are some fraternity colonies, and they're just smaller around here. Yeah, so sometimes there's a couple of other colonies around Austin, like under certain overpasses and things, where it's a smaller group, and that's usually the males. Yeah, but they don't really help with the babies or anything. Yeah. Yeah.
And why three-tailed?
Oh, good question. Oh, I have to go back to, I don't know if I have a good picture. So basically, I don't know if I have a picture. I have to go all the way back to the front. I don't want to give you all whiplash.
We can do it. We can do it later.
Okay. I mean, oh wait, no. I think I figured it out. Okay, so see this picture? Oops, sorry. So usually this is the patagium, is the wing. This is the uropatagium between the feet and tail. A lot of bats, it goes all the way to the tip of their tail. With these guys, it doesn't. So their tail is actually free at the end. So that's where the name comes from. Yeah. Great question. And I've heard that if you get peed on or pooped on while viewing them under the bridge, it's good luck. So.
Just like the purple martins.
Exactly. It's just like that. It's just they're going out and the martins are coming in. So this is Congress, obviously. Has anyone been to Bracken Cave? Yeah. So it is the largest bat colony in the world, in the whole entire world. It's Mexican free-tailed bats. There's about 20 million in there. It's about 10 million, and then the moms all give birth to about one pup, so then the population doubles. It is BCI. We actually own the property, and it's open to the public. You can come visit. You just have to go to our website and sign up that way.
Where is it?
It's between San Antonio and Austin, right next to Natural Bridge Caverns.
So,
Yeah.
is it like, I mean, we went to Carlsbad when the kids were a little bit younger.
Yeah.
It was pretty spectacular, so it's like that.
Yeah, but they only have about 750,000 bats, and this is 20 million.
Yeah, so I mean, it blocks out all available light.
Yeah, they just come out in this tornado.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I noticed
yeah.
they just spin out.
Very similar to Carlsbad, just way better. No, I'm just kidding. I was there last summer and I was like, so, nice bats, how many you got? And they were like, 150,000. They didn't know who I was, and I was like, I work at Bat Conservation International and get 20 million. It's weird. They're like, no, it's great. Weird lady. Stop talking to us.
Do they leave in the fall from this cave?
Yeah, so we think some of them actually stay year-round now, which is, I think, mainly due to temperatures kind of getting warmer. But then also, I think a lot of them go back down to Mexico to spend the winter, and then some free-tails that are farther north come and spend the winter in Bracken. So they're kind of figuring that out right now. It's confusing, but there are always bats in the cave, for sure.
How many are under the Congress Street Bridge?
About a million and a half. Yeah. So, it's a lot of bats. Okay, so how can I help bats? This bat says make a bat garden. What is a bat garden, you ask? Well, this is just I don't think I have to explain to you guys why you should do this, right? We all love native plants. I feel like he gets it. But yeah, I was just doing some research a couple weeks ago, and just found 83% of us live in urban and suburban areas, and almost 40 million acres of that land is just lawns, which is just this, I mean, non-native trees, grasses, it's just kind of an ecological dead zone, and there's just so much potential in these urban and suburban areas to provide habitat for wildlife, and bats are totally included in that. So that's a sad bat. So yeah, so thinking about gardening for bats, really it's native plants because all of our bats here eat bugs, so native plants support our insect populations. And with bats, you really want to think about roosting habitat as well as food. So it's kind of two things. With food, we're really trying to attract nighttime pollinators, basically. And don't worry, it's not like bees or monarchs or not any of the charismatic pollinators that people, love. It's more moths that are great, but, not as exciting. I hate saying that because moths are cool, but one lady yelled at me because she thought they were eating monarchs, and they're not. So yeah, you just want to think about things that attract insects at night, basically. So there's flowers, that open their flowers later in the day, flowers that leave the flowers open all night, which is really important. You can also really get in the weeds with moth host plants. There's actually a really cool book that I'll show you in a minute that just came out last year. It's all about Texas moths and host plants you can put in, and they have the coolest caterpillars, moths do. Things that are fragrant, so fruit trees are great. They attract a lot of insects at night. Light colored flowers are really kind of pop in the dark for certain things. So, bats eat mosquitoes, but they are also mostly eating moths and then beetles, so like those nighttime pollinators. And they also eat our garden pests. So if you have a garden and it's an organic garden, these are some very delicious bat food. These are like chunky cheeseburgers for bats, basically. And then I know everyone loves this one. Who loves these guys? No? I think they're cool. But yeah, they turn into the Carolina six moth, which is a very large moth, which is probably a delicious bat snack. So if you can garden organically and leave some of the moths to go into adulthood, bats are really, really great pest control. So it works really well with native plants and an organic garden. So this is the book I was talking about, Lynn and Jim Weber, which probably have done a talk here at some point, I'm guessing. They're amazing. They have a lot of books about Austin and Texas specifically, but they just put this one out. They also have one for butterflies too, but it's kind of the first in a while, it's been a while since anyone was really like aggregated all the information about moth host plants in such a digestible way. So this book is fantastic. Absolutely love it. And I don't get paid for saying that. I just love this book. And then, is it a native species? That's a great question, because, you can get really in the weeds. You can be like, well, it's native to here, but then there's stuff here that's native to like West Texas that people plant. And Texas is such a big state with so many ecological regions that sometimes it's hard to sort of figure out what's native and what's not. So there's a lot of really fantastic resources. I feel like you're probably going to learn more about that next time, possibly, to be continued. But yeah, I think I always recommend just trying to get it as close to this ecoregion as you can and kind of going from there. And making sure you're not planting something that will behave like an invasive plant, because we do not want that. But these are just some examples. So these are sort of some of the things that we recommend that attract moths, attract insects, that you may already have in your garden. So this is just a couple of examples, by no means an exhaustive list. We also really want to get some what we call bloom time succession, where you want to have something blooming as much as you can throughout the year, because that supports insects kind of throughout the year, which supports bats. Here, since the winter is generally not that intense, like if it's above about 50 degrees, the bats will come out from wherever they're hanging out and they will actually start to eat. So if you have something blooming in the winter, if you can pull that off, or in the dead of summer like right now, A+. And this is a great vine. Cowpen daisy is amazing. It survives this condition right now. I've got one blooming in my yard. And then in the fall, goldenrod is fantastic. It also blooms right when the monarchs are usually migrating through, so it's a great plant for a lot of different reasons. Milkweed attracts a lot of different insects, not just monarchs. There's lots of things kind of going on with milkweed, as well as the flowers attract things too. So milkweed's great. I know it's always a hard thing to grow here. It's sort of tough, but if you can do it, that's fantastic. And then I always recommend Jimson weed. I know it's sort of controversial because it is technically poisonous, so don't eat it, don't mess with it. But the flowers bloom at dusk, and you can actually see the sphinx moths coming to pollinate it. And they have these guys as their babies. So Jimson weed is a really cool plant. It's such a good moth host plant too. And then we always recommend trees, and I'll talk more about trees as roosting habitat, but fruit trees, pecan trees, nut trees, trees generally they all have flowers, usually unless it's like a male and a female tree, but they usually leave their flowers open all the time, and they may be small flowers, we don't think about them, but they attract a lot of insects. So yeah, Pindywood, Mexican plum, I could just keep going. I love them all. And then, I don't know, how many of you have heard of Doug Tallamy? He wrote Nature's Best Hope and couple other books, yeah, just about gardening for wildlife in your yard. He just wrote a book about oak trees that's just fascinating, but oak trees are kind of supporting this whole entire ecosystem on their own. It's just fascinating. And they're so great for insects and they're so great for bats. So always recommend oak trees. You probably have oak trees already. I hope so. The escarpment live oak does really well here. And then I did mention palm trees. So this is a red bat hiding in a tree. So one of actually the Travis County BCP guys was like doing a survey out on the preserve and just happened to almost walk into this bat. Took a picture. So yeah.
Are palm trees native to Central Texas?
There's certain species. Yeah, I think the sable palm. Do you have palmettos? No way.
Aren't palmettos?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so there are some. There's a lot that aren't, and a lot of them didn't make it during the.
The native ones make it.
There you go.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's another reason to plant native trees. They can handle our wacky weather. And then so roosting habitat too. Trees are great because again they have their flowers open all the time usually. Some of them support a lot of different insects, but also you need that roosting habitat for bats, for places to hang out for the tree roosting bats. So just a couple of examples. There's me. Look, I have a red bat in my mulberry right there. Amazing. I am a nerd, I know. So I talked about dead trees, also this idea of vertical layers. So even if you have a small space, you kind of think about your yard vertically instead of horizontally, you can kind of provide, ground cover, low shrubs, smaller trees, bigger trees, of all these different niches for insects within a very small space. And that is good, supports more insects, supports more bats. So we do have a guide for gardening for bats. It's on our website, so you can go check it out. I'm also happy, Paul, to just send you the PDF if you want to share it with everyone.
Sure.
Okay, you can do that. It's pretty much all the stuff I just said. So you guys remember all of it, right? So does anyone have questions about bat houses? Does anyone have a bat house that's currently unoccupied? Yes, very common story. So we used to really recommend bat houses. We kind of had a whole bat house program. But we sort of pivoted away from bat houses just because they have limited conservation value. And they're very frustrating. Because you can follow all these things that we recommend, do everything right, and still not get bats. And, that's hard sometimes because you get your hopes up. You're hoping. But yeah, if you do want to put up a bat house, that's absolutely fine. Think about they only really work for certain species. So kind of, you might get free-tails or evening bats in your bat house, but they're not going to work for the tree roosting bats or kind of the other kinds. So, we kind of switched to this more holistic gardening for bats idea because it helps all the bats, basically. But you want to make sure you buy a good bat house. There's some really bad ones on a site that is named after a river in South America. So just buy smart. Just take a minute. Yeah.
So are there any tips because we could easily, we have an owl box and it's popular, but I've noticed other people on our street have owl boxes that are not populated, and I suspect that it's because of which direction it faces and other environmental factors. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. I think, so it's probably true. It's just not in the right spot. Sometimes the owls are really territorial too, so it might be that if you have an owl, maybe they don't want to move next door or something. Bats aren't as territorial usually, but you want to make sure they like a lot of sun. So they do like it hot, but you just want to make sure they don't get that hot afternoon sun because they will just bake in there. And then a lot of people will put them on a tree. Not good. So basically if you do things wrong, it's not like the bats are going to move in and be in trouble. They just won't move in. So, if you put it on a tree, it's much more vulnerable to predators, so it's not going to be an attractive spot for bats. So we always say 20 to 30 feet from the nearest tree, 12 to 20 feet from the ground because they actually do just drop down and kind of swoop out. And then if it's near a water source, does anyone have water right now? Yeah, a pond, a pool? Yeah, if you have water, that's fantastic. Patience also. Bats will drink out of pools in the summer during droughty times. Yeah.
Why no screens?
Oh, so the screens, we used to recommend the screens, but we found that as the houses get older and break down, the screens start to break down and then bats can be trapped. Yeah, so we stopped recommending that. We more just recommend you sand the inside or you kind of cut grooves so they can hang on. But yeah, great question. We're learning, always learning, right? So yeah, other bat-friendly yard tips, keep it organic, keep your cat inside at night. It's good for your cat too. There are cats will eat bats, you know, they're predators. They will eat anything they get their hands on, so we have seen it. We also really recommend keeping your yard as dark as possible because there's so much light pollution around here. And if there's too much light pollution, there's just a lot of feedback and it makes it harder for the bats to echolocate effectively. So they're more likely to kind of avoid areas of bright light. But if your yard is kind of this dark, safe, native plant, lovely spot, you know, then maybe they'll come visit. We also, you know, we talk about sound pollution too, and there's a lot of sound pollution out there. A lot of it's in the ultrasonic spectrum. We can't hear it, but just thinking about trying to keep your yard as quiet as you can too is important. And then water. So bats need about 7 to 10 feet to drink. So if you have a bird bath, they're not going to use it. So that makes it a little complicated here. They actually will swoop down. They open their mouths and they just scoop up water that way, which is very impressive that they can do that. But so they will visit pools. I have seen that many times here, especially like right now. If you have sort of a pond, or some people put out like water troughs that are longer, that works. It just has to sort of be unobstructed so they can kind of fly in and fly out. And then if you,
did you say? How many feet?
7 to 10. Yeah, so and you know, the smaller ones don't need as much, but, and then we always recommend a wildlife escape ramp if you have
It's
a
not
pool.
long or in depth? Like-
Long.
Okay.
Yeah, long, yeah, for sure. Because they don't need that much in depth, but they just need to kind of like gear up and then swoop out. Yeah. So yeah, put in a wildlife escape ramp if you have a pool anyway, just to make sure nothing falls in. Bats, you know, they can actually swim. They're not great at it, but if they do fall in, they kind of like hug the side and they swim around and look for a way out. So they can swim. Fun fact.
How far away can the water be? Like, if there's a pond that's down the road a mile or so?
That's, I mean,
That works?
yeah, in the summer they will go, you know, that's the first thing they do when they come out, usually at dusk, is look for water. Because it's like, you know, when you wake up in the morning, you're usually thirsty, same with them. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, they've traveled as far as they have to get water. And right now they're traveling farther, for sure. Yeah. It's a good place to see bats too. If you do have a fresh water source near you that has water right now, if you go at dusk, you may very well see bats kind of swooping down and drinking right at dusk, which is really cool. So, you are all bat advocates now. Congratulations. Thank you. Spread the message, spread the love. That's all I ask. And I will take any questions that you have. But thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Can that water source be elevated? Does it have to be at ground level? Or
No, it can be elevated. We've had people do like sort of like a trough kind of, like yeah, that works definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
How
And then-
wide? If it was a trough style that was elevated, what would you say?
I don't know, maybe like 1 or 2 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be that wide, honestly. It's just like Austin Bat Refuge, what they've done, because they have a whole flight cage in their backyard where they keep their rehabilitated bats, but they have like a tarp that they've basically kind of dug. They have like a kind of a hole in the middle, like they've sort of made 2 hills on either side, and there's like a depression in the middle, and it's a long thing, and then they just put a tarp down, and they just fill that up with water, and the bats will just come and drink out of it. So, you know, it's an option. If you're feeling creative, there's lots of ways to do it, for sure. Yeah.
You talk about, you know, bats benefit to agriculture, so
Yes.
I'm wondering what, I mean, I was thinking, oh, well, we should build more bat houses, but maybe not. But are there efforts for, you know, for farmers to encourage bat populations, kind of like they do with bees? And
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of farmers, you know, recognize the importance of bats. So there is a lot of farmers that do bat houses. They do these like big bat condos, basically, which is just like a giant bat house. We've seen a lot in California at the vineyards. Like they will actually try to like build kind of bat houses around the vineyards to eat all the insects. So, I mean, I think a lot of farmers realize the importance and try to kind of create habitat where they can. And then, you know, we just recommend keeping it as organic as possible because that really does, you know, that keeps the bats coming, basically. You know, if you're using a lot of chemicals, they're not going to keep visiting. So,
organic farming, obviously.
yeah,
Yeah.
they are pest control, so you don't need it, right? Hopefully. But yeah. Okay. Thank you. You've all been lovely.
I've got a
Okay.
question for you, Erin.
Yeah, Paul.
So throughout my career, it's interesting to talk to people and their either phobias or they're excited about, but nobody likes finding bats in their house or
Sure.
something roosting around their house.
I would like that. I don't know what's wrong with that.
So is there a recommendation on how to best sort of, help out bats at the same time, keep it safe for your kids, your pets, and yourself?
Definitely. I mean, we always say if you have a bat in your house, the best thing to do is to open the windows and turn off the lights, and the bats will find their way out usually. If they seem like they're injured or confused, you can always kind of put a box over them with gloves on. Make sure you're wearing gloves. Put a box over them if you can, and then kind of just scoop them up in that box, and then call Austin Bat Refuge, and they will come get it basically. But yeah, you just want to use common sense. You just wear gloves, and if you feel like, you're maybe I got bit, I don't know, you can always err on the side of caution with that kind of stuff. If you're worried about rabies, it's always good to just be cautious. And, I think sometimes bats will find their way into houses and they're just kind of freaked out. And so they're just, sometimes they have trouble echolocating in a house where there's lots of light and noise and confusion. So just turning the lights off, staying quiet, giving them an exit, they should be able to find their way out. Yeah.
Another thing that works great is a big bowl and then you just slide a cookie sheet under it. I do that when mice are in my house.
I do that with spiders too.
You don't have to kill mice, there's no reason. I just slide a cookie sheet real gently and take them out.
I'm impressed you catch mice with bowls.
Yeah, well, unfortunately I have cats that like to bring mice in.
Oh, but that's just
And I don't
a
have
loving
to
gift.
Sorry, they are cute.
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways to get wildlife out of your house in a gentle way. You don't have to kill it. Yeah.
Can I ask you to go back to the slide that had that house?
Yeah, that's right.
So it's right next to a vent.
Yeah.
And I've seen other pictures with bathhouses right next to vents. So is that, they don't roost in the vent?
So usually in this situation, yeah, a lot of times bat houses work really well if you're trying to get a bat out of somewhere and help them find a new place to roost. So in this situation, I'm guessing the bats were roosting in the attic, and basically what you do is you wait for them all to leave, and then you seal up kind of the places they were getting in and put a bat house right next to it, and usually they're pretty happy to kind of just switch. So that's kind of usually what happens. Also, a lot of times the best spot for a bat house is just this part of the house, where they're up against the wall. You can put them on a post, but against the wall, the temperature is much more regulated. So sometimes this is the best spot. You just want to make sure they kind of can't get into the little cracks in your house and find their way. Yeah.
There's probably a screen inside of that vent.
Yeah, it looks like there is.
Prevent the
Not-
bats
Yeah.
from going in. Yeah.
Just the rats are here.
Right, or squirrels. We have a lot of squirrels in our attic for reasons. Yeah. It's hard.
Maybe
Yeah.
different by species, but I think I saw a Bracken Cave special where they talked about the juvenile bats at least can't, take off from the ground. They have to climb up to get a little launching. Is that true of most species, or?
I mean, a lot of bats can do it. It depends on the species for sure. I mean, I think they're much more successful dropping and flying, and that's kind of what they prefer. But, if they do end up on the ground, I think a lot of them will try to get to a higher spot if they can. Or, I think some of them, I've seen them take off from the ground, but I think it's just tough for them. It's just very awkward. It's not what they're used to. Yeah. Did you see Deep in the Heart of Texas?
Maybe that's what I saw.
It's
Yeah.
so stressful, that part about Bracken.
So for the bats that live underneath the Congress Bridge, how far away will they fly at night?
They go about 60 to 80 miles. Depending on, so right now it's droughty. They have to kind of work harder for food. So they're coming out earlier. Earlier in the year when we're getting rain, they come out a little later. They don't have to go as far. So it really depends on the weather, on the crops, kind of what the situation is. But they can fly quite far at night, yeah. Is there a question? Yeah.
I was curious if there is progress being made with the white nose syndrome and what that might be.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a whole white nose research team. And they have a lot of different things they're trying. They're doing some inoculation of some of the bats to see if that works. It's just hard because it's such a large scale that it seems like maybe not effective. In Texas, we're really worried about the tricolor bats being impacted, though they haven't had white nose yet here in this state. So there's like a huge tricolor roost in East Texas, and basically before the bats came back for the summer, they just sprayed the crap out of this roosting area to just kill the fungus. So they're trying that. And then there's a program called the Fat Bat Program, which is they have a great little logo, a very chunky little bat. But it's one of our programs where basically they've realized that bats that have more body weight tend to survive with white nose through the winter, even if they have it. Because the issue is they get so uncomfortable, it causes like lesions on their skin and wings, and they wake up in hibernation. Every time they wake up, they use about a month's worth of food.
Yeah.
So the fatter they are, the more chance they have of survival. So we're setting up these like feeding stations basically near hibernaculum, like near caves, and trying to see if that is potentially successful. And especially the feeding stations are just a bunch of native plants that support host plants for moths, basically. So we have 1 year of research with that, and so far it seems to be successful. And then we've also noticed, like anecdotally, for example, it started in 2006 in New York. The little brown bat used to be the most common bat on the East Coast, and now it's not at all, but they've noticed like certain pockets of little brown bats that seem to be surviving, seem to be making it, trying to figure out why.
So once they survive, they still have this white nose syndrome.
Yeah, and
but they live with it and they're not spreading it.
They're probably definitely spreading it, and every bat basically has been exposed, like I would say from, Arizona east, and then there's a pocket in Washington too. So most bats have been exposed at this point, just to the way it spreads. But it just seems like some of these bats have figured out a way to survive with it or deal with it, which is interesting because, it's in Europe. There's tons of bats in Europe and it doesn't bother them, and we don't quite know why. What's the difference? So there's just a lot happening kind of in real time right now. We're sort of figuring it out, but it's a huge, huge thing for bats. If you go, there's a whitenosesyndrome.org is a website just all about kind of everything that's going on right now. You can check it out, yeah. It's interesting. Yes?
So this is just kind of anecdotal, but Switzerland has eradicated rabies.
Yeah.
So, when you have a problem and you think you can't solve, you might be able to.
Yeah.
And they started putting food out for the foxes with the anti-whatever rabies in it. They have no rabies, you don't have to give your dogs and cats shots, so
That's
it can
amazing.
be done. And there's always hope.
Oh, definitely. And it's just been it's weird because, I think with most species, we talk a lot about like climate change and habitat loss and habitat destruction, and like all of that impacts bats, but white nose is the main issue.
Yeah.
And that's tough because there's not much like, the public can do about it except for just, be aware of it.
Research, figure it out.
Yeah, so that's like, we're just trying to throw everything, all the spaghetti at the wall, research-wise, just see what works.
Sticks.
Yeah, so if you want to donate to us, please do. Help us figure it out. And lots of other groups are working on it too. It's not just us, for sure.
So you said there was a large bat colony in East Texas?
Yeah,
Where would it?
I don't know exactly. It's
cross timbers and piney woods and.
I'm not exactly sure what it is. It's a tricolored bat colony under an overpass, like near a highway.
Oh wow.
And I don't exactly know where it is, but Texas Parks and Wildlife are the one that are working with that colony, so it might be on their website somewhere.
Yeah, it's just because I would here we have caves.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that.
Yeah, so it's a highway overpass. It's not, bats are very adaptable sometimes. Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but
No such thing.
Trapped, like birds are trapped?
Yeah. Sometimes, so it's so like with like radio or like tracking devices or GPS devices or.
Like any of it, banded, yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's hard to ban bats because they like the way they're, you could ban their arm, but their wing is right there. So the bans don't really work because so there's like different ways to kind of monitor them, and like people do different things. But yeah, for example, we now know like the oldest bat in the world that we know of so far was 42 years old because it was caught. It was caught initially and like marked, and then caught 42 years later. So it was at least 42, and that was in Germany. But yeah, there's like a lot of that kind of stuff, and like we're trying to figure out like bat migration is so weird because the birds are generally like very like focused and kind of, but bats like they just kind of like go all over the place and like just checking stuff out, and like So we're trying to kind of monitor them for that as well and just figure out more information. And because I think there's still so much about them that we don't know, even in the United States, because they're just, they're cryptic and they come out at night and they're hard to track and follow. But yeah, there's a lot of that work going on for sure. That's a great question, by the way. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Is
Oh,
there
yeah.
any other birds or things that compete with the bats that could be problems?
No, I mean, in terms of just like competing for food?
Well, I have owl houses in my yard. Is that like a competitor?
No, I mean, so I'm guessing it's screech owls.
There's screech owls and,
Yeah, so they don't usually eat bats, I don't think. But there are birds that eat bats for sure. If you go to the bridge in Austin or Bracken, Bracken is crazy because it's a bunch of. Have you seen the? It's brutal sometimes.
Beautiful prairie falcons sitting
Yeah,
in
just-
the air.
They just dive right into the flock of bats and grab one, and then the Swainson's hawks will grab them and they eat on the wings. They're just ripping them up, it's rough. But they gotta eat too. They have babies. They're, it's all connected. Circle of life, whatnot. I know. But yeah, so there are bird predators of bats, and actually I've heard downtown the main issue for bats downtown is grackles, which is wild. But Austin Bat Refuge is telling me they get so many grackle-related injuries and deaths from the bridge, which is really? I don't think that's an issue anywhere else, just there. But
The grackles are hurting the bats.
yeah, they're going for the bats, for the babies particularly. They're very opportunistic, and they're grackles. They don't care. Grackles are gonna grackle.
Didn't you mention earlier not to put that up in a tree because?
Yes,
So what would, do you have a birds would get to it or squirrels?
possibly
or
mostly snakes,
I mean,
rats. Yeah, other predators definitely. If it's in a tree, it's really vulnerable then. So yeah, we don't recommend it. Yeah, but I would say back to your owl house. I think the bats may not want to roost right next to an owl house potentially, but I don't think they're competing for the same food.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of like birds are on the day shift, bats are on the night shift, so there's not a lot of competition for the same type of food generally.
Back when I used to park downtown in the parking garage,
Yeah.
and the bats live in the cracks between the parking garages. Somebody pointed out to me, and I started looking for them and hearing them, and they were everywhere. They're in every single little crack.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
It's the Mexican free-tailed bat is just so adaptable to urban situations. It's amazing. Yeah, so we're kind of lucky we have so many, for sure. They're actually experiencing a range expansion, we think, due to climate change. The free-tailed are kind of going farther north. So they've actually had them in Baltimore now and Northern California, which is pretty wild, but, they're taking advantage of the change. Yeah. Okay, any other questions?